Modern women say they want a peaceful man, but what they really mean is a man who is calm on their terms, a man whose peace doesn't threaten their chaos. Because a truly peaceful man, one who cannot be provoked, one whose silence is not emptiness but authority, terrifies them. Nietzsche understood this. He wrote that whoever cannot command himself will obey, and that true power begins when a man no longer reacts. The man who has mastered himself doesn't need to prove, persuade, or perform. He simply is. And that being exposes something modern women can't handle, their loss of influence over him. We live in an age where emotion is weaponized, where outrage, guilt, and drama dominate the social landscape. Most men crumble under it. They react, they defend, they explain. Their emotions are easily pulled like strings. But when a man doesn't react, when he remains unmoved by guilt, unshaken by accusation, untouched by manipulation, he becomes something rare, almost alien. His calmness reflects her chaos back to her. And that's what terrifies her. Because when she meets a man she cannot emotionally move, she realizes that her usual power no longer works. Her beauty doesn't distract him. Her moods don't unsettle him. Her validation doesn't define him. He's sovereign. He's complete. And that calm superiority, born not from arrogance but from detachment, forces her to confront her own instability. It's not that she hates him. It's that he reveals her lack of peace. Most modern women live in a constant state of psychic noise, social media, comparison, stimulation, endless emotional movement. They crave stillness, yet when they find it embodied in a man, they can't stand it, because his stillness highlights their inner disarray. That's why peaceful men are both desired and feared. Desired because they radiate safety, feared because they can't be controlled. The peaceful man doesn't argue, doesn't chase, doesn't explain. He simply watches, listens, and acts only when necessary. His energy feels untouchable. His silence is not passive. It's judgment. It's the quiet verdict of a man who doesn't need to prove himself to the world. And in a society built on noise, that kind of man becomes dangerous. Nietzsche once said that silence is of the gods, only monkeys chatter. And that's exactly how the peaceful man feels in a world addicted to attention. His refusal to join the chaos makes him an object of fascination and resentment, because peace, in its purest form, is power. And in a world that rewards weakness, power will always provoke fear. The peaceful man doesn't seek control over others. He simply refuses to be controlled. That alone is enough to unsettle anyone who thrives on emotional reaction. So when a modern woman meets such a man, she faces an uncomfortable truth. Her emotional games, her small manipulations, her unspoken attempts to dominate all collapse against his silence. He doesn't fight her. He simply doesn't need her approval. And for a generation raised to believe that validation equals power, there is nothing more terrifying than a man who needs nothing at all. When a modern woman meets a peaceful man, truly calm, detached, and centered, her first reaction is rarely admiration. It's confusion, and soon after, fear, because she doesn't understand it. In her world, men react, men argue, men chase, men validate. But this man does none of those things. He is courteous but distant, present but untouchable. His attention feels deliberate, not desperate. His gaze carries no hunger, only awareness. And so she begins to project. She tells herself he must be emotionally unavailable, arrogant, cold. He must be hiding something, she thinks, because no man could be this calm. But what she's really seeing is not his flaw. It's her own dissonance. She's staring into the mirror of masculine stillness and seeing the reflection of her own inner noise. Nietzsche once wrote, "When you look long into an abyss, the abyss also looks into you." The peaceful man is that abyss, depth that cannot be measured, silence that cannot be filled. And when she looks into him, her own chaos echoes back. That's the psychology of projection. The unstable person calls peace indifference. The insecure person calls confidence arrogance. The emotional person calls silence coldness. We condemn what we cannot understand. And because most modern women have never known true masculine detachment, they mistake it for a lack of feeling. They assume calmness equals emptiness, when in fact, it's the opposite. It's fullness without dependence. The peaceful man is not empty. He is complete. He doesn't need her attention to feel alive. He doesn't seek her approval to feel significant. He moves from self-possession, not emotional hunger. That kind of man disrupts the modern paradigm completely, because the average woman has been taught her worth lies in her ability to capture attention, to stir, to inspire, to provoke emotion. But a man who doesn't react to her charm or her chaos is immune to her power. He sees it, acknowledges it, but doesn't bend to it. And that neutrality shakes her to the core. Why? Because deep down she knows that the more she controls a man, the less she respects him. And the more she respects him, the less she can control him. The peaceful man lives entirely on the second side of that equation. He commands respect precisely because he refuses to be moved. Nietzsche called this Überlegenheit, superiority not born from status or strength, but from mastery of the self. To him, the highest form of power was serenity, the ability to exist untouched by the collective hysteria of the herd. That serenity is what women unconsciously crave and consciously resist. They crave it because it promises safety. They resist it because it exposes their lack of it. So instead of admitting they fear the man they can't control, they label him. He's distant. He's cold. He's emotionally unavailable. It's projection, pure and simple. Her insecurity becomes his fault. But the peaceful man doesn't defend himself. He lets the projection fall away because he knows something she doesn't, that people only project onto you what they cannot face in themselves. And the more detached he remains, the louder the world will try to define him. But his silence remains his weapon, because a man who refuses to defend his peace becomes untouchable. He doesn't need to argue for his nature. His existence speaks for itself. And that's the paradox Nietzsche saw in every strong man. His greatest strength looks like coldness to the weak, because they can't comprehend warmth that doesn't beg to be felt. Peace is not the absence of feeling. It is feeling mastered. And that mastery, to those who have never known it, will always look terrifying. There's a reason most men never become truly peaceful. They confuse it with passivity. They think being calm means being harmless. Being kind means being agreeable. Being detached means being numb. And that confusion destroys them. Because passivity isn't peace, it's paralysis. It's the quiet death of masculine energy under the weight of fear and approval seeking. Nietzsche warned about this very thing. He despised the last man, the man who seeks comfort over greatness, harmony over truth, acceptance over freedom. The man who thinks that by avoiding conflict, he's achieving peace, when in reality, he's only decaying in silence. You see it everywhere today. Men who are polite, considerate, eager to please. Men who mistake softness for virtue. Men who think being endlessly understanding will win them love. But it doesn't. It wins them invisibility. Because no woman respects a man who tries to please his way into her affection. She may appreciate his effort, but deep down, she feels nothing. The polarity dies, the fire goes out, and soon she begins to resent him. Why? Because the man who never stands firm, never says no, never confronts, never commands, isn't peaceful. He's weak, and weakness breeds contempt faster than any cruelty ever could. The modern world has tricked men into believing that masculine restraint is the same as emotional submission. It's not. Restraint comes from strength. Submission comes from fear. One radiates authority, the other bleeds neediness. The peaceful man controls his energy. The passive man suppresses it. The peaceful man chooses silence. The passive man fears confrontation. The peaceful man could strike, but doesn't need to. The passive man couldn't strike, even if he wanted to. That difference is everything. Nietzsche would call the peaceful man übermenschlich, beyond the ordinary human reaction, master of instinct rather than slave to it. But the passive man is the opposite. He calls himself virtuous because he's too weak to act. He hides behind moral softness, behind respect, compassion, and understanding. But under all that civility lies cowardice, the refusal to stand for anything that might create friction. And women can feel it immediately. They test him. They challenge him. They disrespect him. Not because they hate him, but because they're desperate to feel something real, something solid enough to push against. And when they find nothing, they turn cold. The weak man blames her for being cruel. He calls her ungrateful, manipulative, impossible to please. But the truth is, she's not cruel. She's starving for masculine strength, for a presence that doesn't crumble at the first hint of resistance. And when she finally meets a man who radiates calm confidence, who doesn't overreact, doesn't explain, doesn't bend, she feels both terrified and alive, because the peaceful man embodies everything the passive man pretended to be. His silence isn't weakness, it's command. His detachment isn't avoidance, it's control. His peace isn't absence, it's presence intensified. That's the difference between a monk and a ghost. The monk withdraws to gain mastery. The ghost withdraws because he's already dead. The passive man kills desire because he mistakes withdrawal for wisdom. But the peaceful man amplifies desire because he owns his silence like a weapon. In Nietzsche's eyes, true peace was never about surrender. It was the ultimate expression of willpower. It was the strength to not need victory. And that's what weak men can't grasp. They think power is about fighting for dominance. But real power is the freedom to not need to fight at all. Because the man who doesn't need to win can never truly lose. That's the secret of peace. And it's why the weak man collapses, while the peaceful man rises above everything that tries to shake him. The man who has mastered peace is not passive. He is sovereign. He rules not over others, but over himself. Nietzsche saw sovereignty as the highest expression of power. A man whose will is not dictated by instinct, emotion, or herd morality. A man who obeys only his own law. The peaceful man embodies this. His calmness isn't the absence of power, it's power perfectly contained. When you stand in his presence, you can feel it. He doesn't need to dominate because his energy already fills the room. He doesn't need to speak loudly because silence bends toward him. He doesn't need to convince anyone because he carries conviction in every breath. This is the man modern women can't quite comprehend. He's not cold, but he's not available. He listens but rarely reacts. He's attentive, yet impossible to read. His attention feels earned, never given freely. And that subtle restraint, his refusal to be consumed, creates polarity so strong it unsettles everyone around him. Nietzsche would say this man has transcended resentment. He doesn't chase approval or revenge. He doesn't crave acknowledgement. He has nothing to prove because he has already conquered the only enemy that matters, himself. That's what makes him sovereign. He has moved beyond emotional dependence, beyond the need to be seen, beyond the traps that ensnare lesser men. The arguments, the drama, the endless power struggles, they all dissolve before him. He doesn't resist them, he simply renders them meaningless. And that indifference is misunderstood as arrogance. But it's not arrogance, it's clarity. When you no longer seek validation, you become unshakable. The world loses its leverage over you. Women lose their emotional control over you. Society loses its moral control over you. Because sovereignty means you decide what has meaning and what doesn't. That's what Nietzsche meant by becoming who you are. Not finding yourself, but creating yourself through discipline and detachment. forging a mind that isn't dragged by emotion and a heart that feels deeply but never begs. The peaceful man doesn't retreat from the world because he fears it. He steps back to see it. He watches people burn themselves alive with overreaction, outrage, and noise, and smiles quietly, because he knows that true power is not in the scream, but in the silence that follows it. His relationships change too. He doesn't chase women. He doesn't perform. He doesn't compete for attention, because he understands something that most men never learn. Attraction isn't about pursuit, it's about gravity. The sovereign man is gravitational. Women don't chase him because he tries to be desired. They chase him because they feel safe in his self-possession. They sense that he can't be moved, and that makes them want to move toward him. It's not seduction, it's natural law. In Nietzsche's world, this man would be the Übermensch, the man who creates his own morality, who lives by his own rhythm, who no longer needs the world's validation to feel alive. And in today's world, such a man is rare, because most men are slaves to external noise. They scroll, they argue, they react. They constantly need something to fight against. But the sovereign man has nothing left to prove. His silence is proof enough. His peace is evidence of victory. That's why modern women fear him, and why men secretly envy him. He is beyond manipulation, beyond guilt, beyond emotional contagion. You can't guilt a man who's made peace with himself. You can't shame a man who no longer plays by your rules. You can't control a man who has nothing left to lose but his integrity. That's the sovereign man. And Nietzsche would tell you, this is not detachment as withdrawal. It's detachment as dominance. Because the man who has mastered his inner world no longer needs to conquer the outer one. It's already his. The peaceful man stands alone in a world addicted to noise, and that's why he terrifies people, especially modern women. Because his silence does what no argument, no display of dominance, no grand performance can do. It reveals. It exposes the emptiness of those who mistake stimulation for connection, drama for passion, attention for love. Nietzsche saw this coming more than a century ago. He warned that modernity would breed a generation terrified of depth, people who crave distraction because silence forces them to face their own void. That's what the peaceful man represents, the void they've been running from. When a woman encounters him, something primal stirs. She feels both drawn and disturbed. His calm doesn't soothe her, it unsettles her. Because deep down she senses that his peace isn't submission, it's superiority. It's the quiet confidence of a man who doesn't need to compete for attention or approval. And in that calm, she feels her own chaos. Her instinct tries to provoke him, to break his stillness, to make him react, to pull him into the storm where she feels safe. But he doesn't move, he doesn't fight. He simply looks through her with the gaze of a man who has seen too much of the world to be impressed by it. That gaze disarms her completely, because women are used to men who flinch, who chase, who seek to prove their worth. But the peaceful man's energy says, I am already whole. That's the essence of masculine superiority, not arrogance, but wholeness. A man who no longer reacts is a man who no longer depends, and a man who no longer depends cannot be controlled. Modern women, raised in a culture that prizes control, don't know how to respond to that. They can manipulate desire, but they can't manipulate peace. They can inspire lust, but they can't summon reverence. They can attract attention, but not devotion. And the peaceful man gives them none of these. He offers presence instead. Presence without dependence, strength without aggression, calm without fear. It's the presence of a man who belongs nowhere, and therefore belongs everywhere. The kind of man Nietzsche described when he said, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Because his peace isn't passive, it's purposeful. He knows who he is. He knows what he's building. And that clarity makes him immune to the chaos that consumes others. That's why Nietzsche would call him dangerous. Not because he harms others, but because his existence exposes illusions. His composure unmasks their insecurity. His stillness mirrors their noise. His peace challenges their identity. To the modern world, that kind of man is intolerable because he cannot be shamed, baited, or bought. He's not looking for a woman to complete him. He's looking for one who can handle his silence without trying to fill it. And that eliminates almost everyone. Yet the irony is this: the same women who call him cold or emotionally distant will dream about him years later, because he represents something no chaos-driven relationship ever provided: stability that doesn't collapse under pressure. The peaceful man doesn't chase validation. He commands reality. And when he finally speaks, every word carries weight, because it comes from stillness, not need. That's the final revelation. Peace is not weakness, it's dominion. It is the highest form of power because it requires nothing to sustain it. And that's why peaceful men terrify modern women, because they are the living proof that true strength doesn't scream, it stays silent. So if you're listening to this and something in you resonates, remember, don't chase noise. Don't seek approval. Don't try to prove your peace to anyone. Cultivate it, protect it, become it. Because in a world that worships reaction, the man who masters stillness becomes untouchable. If this message hits you, leave a comment. I choose stillness. Share this with a brother who's been told that peace is weakness, because it isn't. It's the final stage of power. And in our next video, we'll dive deeper into why women secretly crave men they can't control. Stay calm, stay sovereign, stay free.